Thanks a
Pass
lot.
the baton to Bruce.
Oh, good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here and share my experiences and to hopefully give back a little bit to the STEM community and also to Goshen. I've had a really wonderful relationship with them over the past few years. I guess you have to know sour before you know what sweet is, and I've had some mixed experiences in working with evaluators over the years, and hope that my relationship with Goshen goes on for a very long time. I'm an engineer by education. I worked in industry for 10 years, came to the university 22 years ago, and have been really enjoying this journey. About 15 years ago, got involved with the vision of creating a leadership development program here at SIU, and that is what has been my passion and greatest challenge. Really helps, that Goshen's leadership has bought into that. They're not looking at it as a job. They're passionate about our mission as well. We can get into that more later when we start talking about lessons learned. But that's it for now.
I'm going to pass it on to Bill in just a second, but I do want to make a quick observation. Bruce is at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois. Bill, Bridget, Mike, Jeffrey, and NASDAQ. All of you guys were part of McAllister and Quinn program development projects. And so that's the one thing the five of you guys have in common. And so and one of the things that's unique about those is you're all typically like at middle or small sized independent institutions. And that's one thing that's also unique with all of you. And I'm going to make one more point. Mike and Jeffrey, you guys are both with Noise, which has a little bit of a different flavor because you're dealing with teacher preparation versus the typical scholarships in STEM disciplines. So that's the thing that Mike and Jeffrey, you guys have in common, whereas Bridget, Bill, and NASDAQ, you're all STEM, and so is Bruce. So you should just be aware that we're all talking about scholarship programs for undergraduate students. So that's the thing that's the same about all of you. So Bill, why don't you give us a little bit of introduction to you and Bellarmine University.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Fenton. I'm in the math department at Bellarmine University, and I've been here many, many years. Our STEM grant is to address a technology need in the city of Louisville, which is where we're located. There's a crying need for technologically capable workers. There's a serious lag among certain populations in the city in their educational achievement and their educational opportunities. And so that's the focus of our grant, to try to capture these academically talented, financially distressed, financially challenged students and get them to Bellarmine, where we can provide them with a career-oriented education. So that's a real quick snapshot of what we're trying to do. Bellarmine is a fairly small private institution that's been around since 1950. We became a university in 2000. There was all kinds of internal politics around that.
I can only imagine. Bridget, why don't you go next? And then Jeffrey, why don't you follow her since you're both at the same institution?
Yeah, hi Jeff, good morning. It's great, two Otterbein folks at the meeting. Matt, thanks for organizing this. So my name is Brigette Ramos. I'm a chemistry faculty member at Otterbein University. I've been there for, I think 8 or 9 years or so. I'm starting to lose count. Before I was at Otterbein, I worked for the Forensic Chemistry Center and Drug Administration. So kind of been in academics and a little bit in government. And this is my first experience with an STEM grant. We're just getting started. We've just kind kind of sent offers out to our first cohort. So we're very excited to get going, and hopefully the students that we've solicited will say yes and join our program. And I am really interested in hearing about folks' experiences with their STEM projects. So thanks for organizing that.
Hi, everyone. Jeff Smith from Otterbein University, along with Brigette. And I'm in the Mathematics and Actuarial Science department. I have split duties. About 50% of my time is in mathematics and 50% of my time is in the education department. So I act as the liaison, the director of undergraduate mathematics education. We also have a graduate program in mathematics that is a math-focused graduate program for AYA teachers. And I'm the director of that program, and I'm also the faculty associate for the Center for Teaching and Learning here at Otterbein. So our project is called Math Majors to Urban School Educators, and we've partnered very closely for many years with Columbus City Schools, which is the largest urban district in Ohio. And our goal is to, by the end of 5 years, graduate 20 math majors with educational licensure to teach grades 7 through 12 and send them in a pipeline into the Columbus City schools. We're also hoping to recruit heavily from Columbus City schools, trying to feed into the pipeline as well. So that's our program in a nutshell.
Mike, why don't you go next, since I know that you're also in a noise type program, and boy, I'm hearing Jeff talk, and I'm hearing a lot of similarities between some of the things that you're trying to do and what Jeff's trying to do. Did you hear me, Mike? I'm not sure if you heard me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not hear my name called. Sorry about that. Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah. So I'm Mike Egan. I'm the PI for Augustana Colleges. Augustana College is in Rock Island, Illinois, halfway between Des Moines and Chicago, right on the Mississippi River. Yeah, PI for our NOIS grant. My background is pleased to hear that Tom spent many years as a physics teacher. I spent 8 years as a high school math teacher, and I worked in urban schools. Many years I taught in Kingston, Jamaica, actually, which was pretty cool to teach overseas. I also taught in the Boston public schools for a while. So long held passion for math education with high needs populations. That was what my doctoral research was focused on as well. My colleague, Mike Schroeder, who's a co-PI on Augustana's project, is a veteran Chicago public school science teacher. So Mike and I have long fostered experiences for our students to engage with high needs schools. So it's just kind of been a tradition here. It's just something that we sort of do anyway, which is a lot of fun, because Augustana is a private school, and I don't want to overgeneralize our students. You can never paint with a broad brush, but we get a lot of suburban students and students that are probably middle to upper middle class who would think of, oh my God, working in the Chicago public schools, that would be a nightmare. I would never want to work there. And Mike and I have really worked hard to provide opportunities for them to experience what it's really like, and recognize that actually urban schools are super cool places to be. So thrilled when this opportunity to get a NOIS grant came along, and now we actually have extra money that can just help us do what we already do even better. So we're committed to placing science and math teachers into high need schools, preferably in the Quad City area, although we certainly, we also, with our relationships in Chicago and whatnot, we're certainly eager to find other good placements for our students.
Mazak, why don't you introduce yourself and Felician University, and then follow up, having Charity follow Nasdaq.
Um, Good morning, everybody. My name is Mazdak Zamani. I'm with the Computer Science Department at Felician University. We have two campuses at Lodi and Rutherford, both in New Jersey. I have some uh, other experiences, different type of grant experiences. Um, More related to my research area. This is my fourth year here at Felician. I work with other universities around the world. But I got some grants in Asia working on security, because my main area of research is cybersecurity, to improve the security of electronic passports with government. And here, this is actually my first educational experience, learning as I learn more. Our school is a teaching university, and now not much research in my field. The more workload is more teaching, but we got this grant, and that was very helpful. As Matt said, that's a STEM grant, and to recruit, retain, and graduate students in biology, computer science, and cybersecurity. I hope Charity will join back and will provide more information. Thank you. It's great pleasure to be here.
And Charity just came back again for just a second whenever she's ready. Charity, did you want to give a little bit of background on who you are? Nasdaq was just talking a little bit about the Felician STEM program. I will say this, at some point, Charity will become a PI for a noise grant. She's been trying real hard over the years. She's on the edge of making it happen. What's going to happen one of these years? So hopefully she'll join us. She is a research lead for the STEM program for Nasdaq's program, but she's very much a co-PI of that. Go ahead, Charity. You describe yourself already. I'm doing a terrible job.
Thank you, Matt. I mean, honestly, from your lips to the universe's ears, because I feel like I'm with kindred souls listening to you guys introduce yourselves. I was a teacher for many years in public urban schools, both in Louisiana and then in the Bronx. I love working with new teachers, and my dissertation was really around ethical practice and teacher preparation, STEM, and just in general. I would say that one of the things that I'm intrigued to talk to all of you guys about, not even just obviously noise specific, but with our STEM Saint Scholars, is just sharing best practices, because I feel like we work in a very similar context as what you described. For us in New Jersey, New Jersey is the most diverse state in the country. We speak over 87 languages. In one of our partner schools, Clifton, which we back end into, there are 65 languages spoken. So bilingual and ESL, teacher of students with special needs. We are a dual licensure program. So everybody at Felician is getting their initial certification and teacher of students with disabilities, no matter what they're going for. And that's something that I really do think, even when I look at our Saint Scholars, there's such wonderful candidates in our program. And some of them express interest in going into computer science and biology, medical fields. That's what we're recruiting for. But when we interview these candidates, I see their teaching potential. And eventually, when we do get that NOICE grant officially accepted, our problem here is that we have such a small number of math and science secondary focused students. We have plenty who are at the elementary and they'll add on the middle school licensure in New Jersey, which you can do, but we don't really have solid math or science majors who want to do secondary. So we kind of keep getting feedback that that's one of the reasons why our application kind of gets bounced out. But regardless, the richness of New Jersey is not just the diversity. We have so many exciting company bridge options for internships. So for our scholars, I really think like the next phase after COVID, one of the questions I have for you guys is how you're keeping those types of activities going when we're also limited in terms of virtual teaching and learning.
And we have a bit of a freeze there. But I think Charity's getting into this, and I want to point out that this is kind of an informal conversation. I will make it as formal as it needs to be in creating structure and giving room for everyone to talk. But the point of all of this is for us to chat and bring up questions and bring up answers as we're thinking through this, so that we support one another in creating successful projects that recruit, retain, graduate students with the intended purposes of either going into a STEM discipline or going into a STEM teaching role. And I'm sure Charity will join with us again in a second. Bruce, do you mind if I throw you a little bit put some spotlight on you, because you have been doing this for, oh gosh, more than 10 years. And could you talk a little more detail about the things that, I mean, I think your program is a little bit different than most, but I think you've got elements of things that makes your program very successful. And I don't want to give away too much, but why don't you talk a little bit about your experience of 10 plus years of being an NSF PI within the STEM community. And then I want to go into some of the different pieces of what the main 5 areas that were in that survey of things. But Bruce, could you talk a little bit about what makes your program successful?
Well, one thing that I was listening for, in particularly from all of you, and I think I heard it. I mean, obviously you all have secured an STEM grant, and that is passion for really your grant charter, right? What is it that you're trying to achieve? I could tell you SIU is a Carnegie One research institution. And I have a lot of colleagues who are striving to make full professor, which usually requires significant publications or grantsmanship. And they chase, like a dog chasing the bus, they chase after these grants to check that box that says, I'm a NSF researcher, right? And some of these guys and ladies have gone through the wash cycle 6-7 times and have never landed a grant yet. And I think they're writing good proposals. They're learning from the reviews each time. But what's missing is that they don't have a real focus. That the whole thing doesn't come together for what is their identity, what is their passion, what are they an expert at. They're simply going after the program du jour, so to speak. And in terms of STEM, somebody mentioned earlier, academically talented, financially disadvantaged students, that has to be the cornerstone of everything that you do. That has to be the focus population. And you have to show where you're going to get students, not only who are academically talented, financially disadvantaged, but also the minority populations. How are you going to tap into the female centric or the African American populations, and have a rock solid plan, a data that backs up where are you going to get these students from and how are you going to do it, and then go out there and create these partnerships. Those reviewers, I've sat through dozens of workshops on how to get an STEM and so forth. They see a lot of really, really good. So they have to get down, they start teasing out the details. Who's really thought this through? who, instead of just saying it, who has the relationships that are going to be able to recruit those target populations that you're going after. And that's really, really important. Yeah. So in terms of other things that we've done, I've gone up and I've visited the program directors a couple times, and you think that with, I don't know how many STEMs are awarded each year, maybe 100, 200, I don't know, but they really do read through your whole program evaluation, or maybe they just did because I was coming to see them. You never know. I feel really good about our grant because we've been able to generate tangible outcomes. Of course, we wanted to, increase, the number of minority students in the program, financially disadvantaged, academically talented, all the metrics, right? We want to recruit more, we want to retain more, we want to have increased graduation. We've been able to do all that. But even more so is we've been able to show a higher placement rate. Education is just the very first step in a long staircase to life. Sometimes when I'm attending commencement and you see these students, we've all been there, you see these students go crazy on stage, right? Woo! And the horns blaring and family yelling and screaming at the top of their lungs. And I said, they've kind of missed the point. I know this is a really big deal for them. They're probably the first in their family generation to achieve this bachelor's degree. But that's not the goal. The goal is a job. The goal is a successful career. Save that celebration when you get your offer letter, right? And so the NSF has been especially pleased with our results of showing 94% pre-graduation placement rate. That's why we're here, is to give these students a successful life. And it's hard because for 16 years they have been programmed that academics is the most important thing. I'm a 4.0, don't mess with me. Nothing's going to just disrupt this GPA of mine. Well, you look at the literature that's out there today, and nothing can be further from the truth. Nationally, speaking of all majors, 2/3 of college graduates are underemployed after graduation. That means that they take jobs that are outside of their majors. That is a travesty of the higher ed system out there. That should not be happening, certainly not for the investment and the debt that our students are incurring. And likewise, even in the STEM field, right? 33% of engineering majors fall into that same category of being underemployed. And I've got 10 corporate sponsors for our program, and they're sponsored because they said they can't find good graduates out there. Well, what do you mean? There's all kinds of engineering 4.0s. That's not what we're talking about. They don't know how to show up to work on time. They don't know how to put a full week in. They don't know how to communicate with their peers. They don't know how to be a team member. They don't know how to hold themselves accountable. All these interpersonal skills are what is at the forefront. They'll teach you the technical knowledge you need to be successful. And so we've made that a cornerstone of our program, is teaching the students those work-ready skills. And NSF really appreciates those metrics that show how your students go on to have success afterwards. That's what they're investing in, is the future, right? And I think that was really an integral in us getting our track 2 STEM, and then the track 3. It keeps getting harder and harder when you go, track 1, there's this many, track 2, there's this many, track 3, there's about this many. We got rejected for our track 3 last year, learned a lot from it, and we'll probably go back and try something different next time.
I want to talk a little bit about recruitment. I'm certainly thinking about Bill and Jeff and Bridget, how you guys are recruiting right now. And I think back a year ago, NASDAQ and Charity had found out that they had gotten their STEM. And then fast forward another 5 or 6 months, I think it was, what was it, June, Mike, when you guys found out that you got your noise, and both of you guys ended up with classes that started in the spring. So maybe I'll start with Charity and NASDAQ and talk about how you started your recruitment and how that went, and maybe some things that you found out along the way. And I think that's going to definitely be interesting to our brand new STEMs at Bellarmine and Otterbein.
Matt, I
So-
think Charity had a question.
Oh, go ahead, Charity.
That's perfect. It's like the perfect transition because Bruce, what you were just saying made me really think about one thing. And then Mazdak, we could talk about recruitment. But my question is, right now we're gathering information about the candidates, how they're doing, and we're looking at their development. They're using dialogical self theory in their development as math. Their math identities, their STEM identities, like from freshman year on, and how that happens. And some of the things that you just described are things that dispositionally in teacher education, we monitor, work on, all of those kind of soft skills. And we have tracking for that. And in teacher education, we do that. But actually in our STEM with the Saint Scholars, we haven't actually thought about that piece at all. And I'm wondering if maybe not just looking at their, identities as math, their math identities, science identities, maybe we should be thinking about putting a tool in place and some programming around all of those dispositional qualities that you're saying. You're absolutely right about. It's not the academic 4.0 student. It's those, being hired, being prepared, really like, what are your outputs going to be when you're in the workforce in this field? And in teacher education, we do that really well, but I never even thought until you said that maybe we need to be thinking about how we're tracking and working on that with them collaboratively throughout their 4 years of undergrad. So I just want to say thank you for that. Maybe we should, kind of bolster that.
I want to share with you an aha that I've recently had. It's difficult for me to recruit for our program, and I will humbly tell you that our program is very difficult. The leadership development program, we ask a lot of these students because our employers want them to learn these skills, and sometimes learning is really, really difficult, especially when you're talking about personal change, personal transformation. And we meet at 5:30 a.m. on Tuesday mornings for Fit to Lead workouts. Try to get a 19-year-old college student to show up at the rec center at 5:30 a.m. right? But that builds grit and perseverance that is going to benefit them 1,000 times over in their careers. So these students talk about this, and other students say, I don't want anything to do with anything like that, right? I want the normal college experience. It's difficult to recruit. And as an engineer, and most of you analytically minded, I said, yeah, but you know what? I'm going to stand on my 1.6 million NSF funding. I'm going to stand on that 94% pre-graduation place, start throwing all these analytics at. This will get the students in. It doesn't. It doesn't. And I was wise. You fail enough times, you start scratching your head going, what the heck am I doing wrong? We recently hired a marketing agency to help us, and they said, what recruits students is brand recognition, credibility, reputation. What they want to see is what they could be in the future. And we've got 11 years of graduates who are out there who are being promoted 30% faster than their peers. They want to see that face. They want to hear the stories. They want to feel the energy, the excitement of our graduates and how leadership made a difference in their life. And then when they see that, they can imagine themselves doing that. And so when you're promoting your programs, have famous alumni or female astronauts, it doesn't matter. say this was a math major. Maybe a math major came up with the COVID antivirus inoculation. I don't know. But if you can show them that this is where people go on to, and it's not only just their math knowledge, but it's these other interpersonal skills, because we all work together as a team, and the value of that. It isn't just what you learn in the classroom, it's these other skills that complement it. And I think that, and on top of it all, these students are looking for communities today. And in our program, it's called the, it's called the social interdependency. None of them would show up at the rec center at 5:30 in the morning by themselves. This ain't gonna happen. But they do it because they got 15 of their classmates all doing it and wondering where they're at if they don't show up. And so you can push them to achieve those greater things, those greater goals, if you get everybody else together. And then they feel proud to be part of that community. I don't want to monopolize this conversation, but I want to answer your question.
I do, before we move on, I do want to restate what Bruce is saying, that social interdependency is critical to creating community. And it's something that before I met Bruce, is something that I saw with successful Moist programs as well. They, Bruce's example is extreme. That's what he chose to do, and I think it's amazing. And I will say, for the most part, I try and show up at 5:30 in the morning and work out with these guys by Zoom right now. God knows what I'm going to do once they go back to meeting in person. But the programs that are successful are gathering their students together in groups on a regular basis. So with noise programs, what I've seen is they have a monthly meeting that's required or semi-required. You better have a pretty good excuse for not showing up. And they, to do what Bruce was saying, bring people in. They actually have been, this was at our local institution, experience are over now, but at SIU Edwardsville, Southern Illinois University, they brought in senior teachers who work in the community, who work in high need schools, and they are peer mentors, and they help lead different conversations, different discussions about teaching and being in the community and being in the school district, and things that you're gonna see as new teachers, and they lead those conversations monthly. And so that's another way of creating community. But it's super important that that your students identify with your program, so that you have program sustainability, so that you have program retention, because a scholarship is a fantastic thing when you receive it, but it's just the start of the student experience. And we have one program that was not successful, and that's because all they did was provide a scholarship, and they didn't have any student interaction. The students just didn't. In fact, when I went to ask the student about their program experience, they said, "What program?" And I said, "Oh, that's a problem now, isn't it?" So, all right, I want to make sure we talk about student recruitment, and I certainly want to think about this from two perspectives, because our Noise programs and Bruce's program recruit students in as juniors, and then our STEM programs recruit students in as freshmen, with the intention of keeping them there for the 4+ years that they would be undergrads. So Charity, could you and Mazak spend a little bit of time talking about how you kind of first took on the big idea of recruiting students into your STEM program for a 4-year experience? Or Mazak, jump in too. I don't need to always call
Want
him
to kick it off,
Charity.
Mazak?
No, please, if
So Mazak, myself, and Pat, who couldn't be here today, we really started our recruitment process amidst COVID. So everything was virtual. And one of the things that I think really became apparent was that we were off on our timelines. So it kind of is what it is. We accepted that and just kind of moved forward. So we have a really good connection with our admissions office. And so Camille, who really helped lead that charge in terms of recruitment,
focused on getting the word out amongst the students who were actually eligible. So on the back end, with the data that she had access to, she would look at the eligibility of their financial aid, which was huge. We did the typical things, information sessions virtually, answered candidates' questions, sent out emails. And then when we got to the stage where the students were ready to be interviewed and we got to meet with each student one-on-one, it really became so apparent how they were freshmen, like they were first-year students coming out, they're in high school when they're interviewing with us. And so it made us really take a step back about our recruitment efforts. And so this year, as we kind of move forward with that, we're a lot more mindful about helping them make the transition into college more smoothly, particularly this year. We're also more cognizant of, again, this is where the dialogical self stuff comes in and their math, science identities, because when they talk so tentatively in the beginning about themselves and they're all first generation college students from underrepresented groups, and they've worked so hard. So in terms of grit and rigor, they're all about that commitment, but they don't really know what that means. And so the recruitment piece of really getting to know who they are has been very, very helpful, because I think if we could leverage that and utilize our knowledge of who they are, and Matt helped us with the grit scale, implementing that as freshmen in the fall semester before they got started. We looked at that data and like 2 were real outliers, 2 of the students. And sure enough, they're the 2 students that had grade issues after the fall semester. They're the same 2 students right now in the spring that we're trying to like increase our efforts to get them more socially connected. Because when we just did our outreach and looked at, well, how are you doing? And making friends. They're literally talking about each other. And thank God so-and-so is in my class and she got to know me and we now study together. Well, the 2 with the low grit are the 2 that don't have any responses about that, about the social connectivity piece. So in terms of recruitment, I'm not getting off. I know my train is coming around to the station. We know that information has to inform how we're recruiting the second cohort this year. So as we interview them, even our questions need to change, because we had the very like cookie cutter, interview questions. And now we have to adjust and account for really getting to know them in this interview so that we can then address their development in a more differentiated way, because there are differences. Even though they all come from underrepresented groups, all come from first generation families, they just might have different computer science and interests versus STEM. Mazdak, does that sum it up well enough?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to add that we had, I don't know, we had last year, but for this year we had open house dedicated for this grant. That was helpful. We had some attendees who wanted to learn more and maybe ask the question during the meeting, and we found it helpful for students and those who are interested.
Bruce, it looked like you were having a pressing question. One of the things that I love about Bruce's program is they have a spring orientation where they bring students in, and it's an intense. They're a very different program in that they're very intense, and we always try and identify which students will choose to be a part of the program, because many of them have that option, and we're always surprised by the people who end up being successful, because it's almost like you can't predict that. But I don't know if that's where you're going with that, Bruce. But students develop and grow and surprise you every day, and that's one thing I think we found.
If I was to try to pick who's going to be successful, I'd be 180 degrees off. It's never the high talent. Never. Just I go opposite direction. Now here's something interesting for you to think about, Charity, is why does your program exist? Is it for those students that do so well, or is it to help those 2 that fall away? this is what my wife brings to me or reminds me every time that we have your situation. And it's really to help those two, because if they don't get the help now, they certainly won't have the skills to be successful in life. And they become, sorry to say it, a burden to society. And it feels like the whole educational system has failed them. But in my experience, where it begins is with a heartfelt conversation with them. Are they a motivated learner? What is their dream? What is it that they want? And then you can articulate how you can be the conduit to help them achieve those goals through the program, because they need that social support more than anybody, but they've never had it. They don't know how to make these supporting relationships. And this is the turning point for them. They've been used to being filtered out and discarded time and time again. And so they just learn to work by themselves and get good grades until they hit, the point where they can't do it anymore. So that's my challenge to you, is to sort of leave no child behind and use your team your team will be better at bringing them up more so than you will.
Bridget, you said you seem to have something you wanted to chime in on.
I did. I kind of wanted to bring the conversation a little more pointedly back towards recruiting. I just had a question about that. So we are kind of just wrapping up actively recruiting our first incoming cohort. So we don't have students on campus yet. We're recruiting, from the high schools, as you mentioned, into the first year class. And we've kind of used the standard techniques. We've developed a website to talk about the program. We've worked with admissions where they have sent out like mass emails and texts to STEM folks. I generated, with the help of our admin staff, a list of I think a little over 400 high school counselors and physical science teachers in the high school, and did a direct reach out to them because we were accepting teacher recommendations for students as well. We piggybacked on kind of university admission events for STEM for their recruiting. We took part in those, and we've partnered with some organizations like Bio Ohio just to kind of get the word out. So I was feeling really good about all this marketing that we were doing. And we certainly have kind of generated a list where we have made all of our offers. But I'll be honest, I was quite frankly dismayed by how difficult it is to reach out to high school juniors and seniors and get them to open an email, read a text message. And I'm just wondering if there are other magical ways to get the information out. I felt like the students that we did finally contact with, it wasn't hard to get their interest. But it was more like, no, I've never heard of this. I just was wondering if there's some better way that people have found.
I'll give you my 2 cents. I've been there. I shake my head, and I'm just like, what? Why aren't we turning away hundreds of people? I mean, to have a fast track career upon graduation, to have all of your school expenses paid for, it's unbelievable. They should be climbing all over one. What do we have to do? So we've tried them all, and the 2 things that work, 2.5 things that work well for us. One is if you have relationships, personal relationships with those school counselors who have sent you students who've been successful, they're more likely to send you more because they now know that your program is of value. But more recently, when you said you piggybacked off of admissions, that has been our latest, most successful technique. When students apply to your university, college, then they're automatically put into the scholarship pool and say, hey, you may be eligible for this STEM program. And that is almost like fish jumping in the boat. And that is your motivated learner, if you will. That's your greatest resource. Your second greatest resource is your students that you have. They all have friends. and they're friends because they have shared values. And if you can empower your students to go out, I make it mandatory. So don't come back until you've got 3 names, right? And it doesn't matter if they wash out at spring orientation or whatever, but everybody's responsible for 3 names. Come back with these people, and they may be doing their friend the greatest favor in life. I've had three children from the same family come through the program because they, word of mouth. So use your select pool to find other people who also fit into that pool.
Bruce,
Sure,
that's such a good idea. We have 3 that are from one particular high school, Union City High School. So to Bridget's point, we should, MASDAC, be going to Union City and talking up that counselor now, because 3 of our successful candidates are from there. But even more so, we should ask each and every one of them to refer their friends from the class under coming up, as well as current. That's such like, I can't believe we didn't think of that.
Now, Charity, the thing that you guys have going for you, and I say it all the time, is you're super close and super supportive connection with admissions. Not everybody gets that level of connection. So could you talk a little bit about that?
I think because Felician is very small, I'm used to, for 12 years when I was getting my doctorate, a large public, the research institution, and it was just kind of like a machine. At Felician, it's very small. And so that one relationship with Camille, just, it's so scaffolded, because she'll do the outreach when they're just talking about coming to our university. Then she'll do targeted, like I said, things with the financial eligibility. She is also the person that, like, when we wanted to make gear and have, stuff to give them all, like, she gets someone in her unit to do that piece of it, like all the ordering. So I'm like wondering who the gold mine admissions contact could be in each. I feel like maybe that has to come from the top too, though, because I feel like our VP of Academic Affairs is friends with her, and she's like, Camille is going to work with you guys. So I feel like maybe going to whomever that enrollment management VP or academic affairs VP to say, we need someone who's housed in admissions to be our, like, point of contact. It might be just 10% of their work, but if it's assigned to someone, then I think it's huge, because it's like, those calls where it gets passed around, or the email that never gets answered because it gets batted to like 5 different people, when there's just that one person who's designated as, part of their responsibilities.
And I want to restate how involved Camille is. She shows up to every meeting every 2 weeks. And so I never expected that. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I think Goshen is off to a really good start. I'll be remiss if we don't switch the conversation, talking more about recruiting into teacher prep programs. Mike, I shake my head and I think, how did they do it? I wanted you to talk a little bit about finding out you were awarded the Noyce grant and after graduation, and how you started off with a class in August. And talk to me about that process. And I know Jeff is sitting here probably ready to take notes, because he's got a little more runway for this. But Mike, you guys made it happen in a flash in the pan. It's just unbelievable.
Well, you started, when I first joined the call, Matt, you said, why isn't Augustana a university? And this is part of the reason why. The relationships we have with our students are very intimate. So when we got the grant in June, I had 7 math ed advisees that are sophomores. My colleague Mike Schroeder had 4 science ed advisees that are sophomores. I sent a personal email to my advisee. They know who I am. They read it because it's coming from me, right? I was listening to some of the concerns about marketing and recruiting and whatnot. I'm the father of a high school senior right now. My daughter gets so many messages from so many schools with so many golden opportunities that it's just all noise. You know, I mean, so I know that our programs are amazing, but if you try to sell that in the midst of all the other noise that these kids are getting, I would ignore it too if I was a 17-year-old. But when my advisees get an email from me because we have a relationship, they're like, oh, I'll pay attention to this. And likewise for my colleagues. So in some ways we have a kind of an unfair advantage where our fish are sitting there in the barrel and we just have to grab them, because we know who they are. We have relationships with them. They're going to listen to us. I know, God, I feel so guilty even saying that because it's so nice to be in this intimate setting where we have these relationships with our students and they'll listen to us. So it's not some awesome marketing program. It's just a matter of reaching out. Some of the students were like they had questions, so it's like, cool, let's have a phone call. I must have had 3 or 4 phone calls where I was able to talk it out with these students, and just because there's a relationship of trust there, they were willing to work with me. I'm assuming that a place like Otterbein will probably be very similar, right? It's just a matter of who the candidates are. Go have conversations with them, and I'm sure they'll be interested in joining you.
It's interesting that you say that, Mike, because one of my advisees who knew that I was working on writing this grant has been constantly, what's happening with that grant? What's happening with that grant? Have you heard anything about that grant? And so it hasn't been officially announced at the university level yet. And somehow he found out, and he's like even going to people in the education department saying, all right, am I eligible for this? How do I apply for this? So I think you're absolutely right. The personal connections are an easier route, at least for us.
Jeff, you bring up a pretty good point, and I think all of our successful programs, this is early for that person, but you build around like some of the really successful people who get really excited, and you tap in on some of that energy, and that becomes infectious to other students. Because there's only so much that you as a faculty member can do to excite the students, but the students are going to feed off the energy of other students. And Bruce certainly has that experience with his, because you see these students who are really into it, and when students join the LDP, they see and they feel like, hey, I would love to be kind of like that person. They identify with them. And I think that's something to think about building around, because that's where the energy in the community comes in. We've got about 30 minutes left. It's this up as a 90-minute session. I want to make sure we talk about student retention and peer mentoring and different things like that. So anybody have any comments or any questions about the student retention piece and ideas that you have around those? Because once the students have been recruited, I already talked about it, and Bruce talked about the process of creating community by having regular, whether it be at every Tuesday morning at 5:30 at the rec center, or monthly meetings. But there's a lot more to community, and maybe I just want to give some space for that community that happens, and what are some of your ideas or questions that you may have?
Matt, I'll bring up something that was gave me a lot of angst in terms of retention, and I'll call it sort of the dark side of retention. Okay, all of you will undoubtedly have some students who don't fit into the program. You may find even that they're subversive. They have signed up for the money or the scholarship, but not the extra time. I've had students who've always worked 3 jobs. They come from a working family. They've always worked, and your program is just getting in the way, and they're not willing to put in the time. And in fact, when you try to hold them accountable, they will tell the other students in the program, why are we here? Why are we having to do all this extra work? This is federal funds that's owed to us or something. And your tendency, your knee-jerk reaction is kick them out of the program. We've gone that route. We've had that experience before. What I feel like we have evolved to a better approach is to what I call off-tracking these students, because the NSF wants you to help these students. Again, academically talented, financially disadvantaged. You pull that help away from them, you could send their lives potentially on a downward spiral. And we care about these students too much to let that happen. So I take a soft hand approach. It's not my money, it's the taxpayers' money that I'm spending here. And so I'll off track these students and say, okay, you don't like the program, that's okay. What you are passionate is about, the STEM major that you chose. And let's see if we can't get you connected with a professor and becoming a research assistant. Is that something you would like? And they always undoubtedly say, yes, I would like to do. I could spend 10 hours a week working with that professor, and that way you retain the metrics in their program or your program. They're getting a high quality education in the field that they want, and you don't kill their chances of graduating from college.
So can I just throw it out to some of the group and say, what are some of the other strategies that you built into your grant or things that you have thought about in keeping your students, your scholars active and involved in other complementary activities, co-curricular activities? When I read through the responses to the survey, I saw lots of things about high touch and academic coaching and peer mentoring. So I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm not going to call on anybody, but if you could just, anybody who's interested in talking about your plans or your experiences or question about your plans and how to do implementation for that, this is a good time for that. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I'll say something. I mean, we haven't even initiated our grant yet, but we have some interesting structures in place at Otterbein that Brigette can also talk to, because we're both part of a group that does some early promotion to entree into the university in this a program called RISE. But another facet of this program RISE is we have a very strong staff community here at Otterbein. And we have a whole cadre of staff members that have become academic coaches for students. So we've identified through our Center for Success 50 or so students who may be at risk for a myriad of reasons. And they become part of this program that has a staff member that's assigned as an academic coach. And they meet weekly with these students, and they have a whole series of, it's not just a, hey, what's happening? There are specific things that they talk about, like, how do you go visit a professor during office hours? What does that mean? How do you prepare for that? Because, a lot of our students have never had that kind of experience. And even if they've been, even for example, with my students who will have been in college for 2 years, may not have had any kind of experience going to a professor for office hours. So these academic coaches that are part of the staff, I think is really important, because our students feel as if there's a contact person that's in the know, that has no skin in the game, isn't giving any kind of grade, that they can go and talk to. So I think that's a really, that idea of academic coaching is really important.
Yeah, Bill, go right ahead. I think, Jeff, what you were saying is one of those things that we know about student engagement and successfully student retention. when we look at the history of the National Student Survey of Student Engagement. And the point that you're making there, Jeff, and I'll let you talk in just a second, Bill, is finding ways to connect students to their institution. And if they don't connect with a peer mentor or a peer or a faculty member, it's like everybody's a unique individual, and finding that way to connect them with an individual. I think that's, and as you guys probably picked out, I'm getting to know Bellarmine and Otterbein because they're relatively new to me, but it's really neat to hear about that. So thanks for sharing. Bill, why don't you share with us?
Sure. We're pulling together and piggybacking on a lot of programs that are already going on. Bellarmine has a program for first generation students called the Pioneer Scholars, which involves a weekly small group meeting with a peer mentor to check on those things. Do you know how to talk to a professor? Do you have assignments due this week? Have you started studying for your next test? Just sort of a informal peer monitoring of how they're managing their first semester especially, but it goes on through at least the first year. It might go on all 4 years. The majors that we've focused on are eligible for a learning community, and in fact, we are requiring our participants to be in this learning community. The particular one has floundered in the last couple of years, but we've appointed a new director, and we're going to support him and get him organized to try to revitalize that in this coming year. I imagine a lot of you are doing cohort courses. We've got at least 3 courses in the freshman year that all of these students will be in together, and not just math and computer courses. There's a required course called Freshman Seminar, and we're creating a special section on a topic germane to their majors that all of them will be in together. We're going to look for opportunities to do that throughout the 4 years, but the freshman year especially, to try to build that cohesion and community among them.
You're right, Brigette.
I'm actually going to build on what Bill said. One of the things, and again, we haven't started this yet, but one of the things we're really excited about is we're having our scholars, it's a requirement as part of the program that they'll enroll in a very low credit. We only would meet basically for an hour every other week. So it's a course designed for that cohort, but what's exciting about it is that they sign up for it all 8 semesters. So the course evolves with the students. And so our first year, I'm kind of looking at my topics from my proposal syllabus. It's kind of like intro and identity of self-advocacy. We'll focus on some academic skills building like scientific writing and communication. Then we have segments on kind of looking at race, power, and privilege. I have a segment on identifying your strengths and knowing your story. And then one of the goals is for that first year for them to build what I'm calling an individual success plan. Kind of almost, I don't want to use the word IEP, that's not appropriate in this sense, but this kind of intentional planning that's designed, that they do their own design, right? That they're looking. So I'm really excited about that. Where in the middle years, it'll be more focused on success within their individual majors. And then it would evolve to career planning, something that Bruce, is basically, that's their focus, right? As I understand your program. So we're trying to kind of have that required course be our place for meeting and allow for continuity that I'm hoping will be a linchpin for retention, I'm hoping.
I know this is a bit of probably a sour grapes for charity because they tried really hard to get all of their students to take courses together as a cohort, but the institution kind of fought that or didn't want to endorse that idea.
And that's so true. it's interesting because just getting back this last round of surveys, they didn't seem to mind it so much, that piece. So I'm like trying to let that go. What I'm interested in from what they were telling me about more was when I asked them, because we had, obviously with COVID and not being on campus, to get them engaged socially, we launched this platform. It's a computer sciencey one called Discord, because we have some computer science and we have some bio. And I asked them how much they engaged with other Saint scholars on it. And resoundingly, it was like rarely or sometimes at best. And the other question I asked them was, what other social media platforms would you be interested in? And they were resoundingly Snapchat and Instagram. So that's something that I thought would be like helpful to share, because they're going to engage with each other, even when we're back, obviously, from COVID and we're on campus, with social media, and us old fogies who are on Facebook, they want nothing to do with. And they resoundingly were like, Snapchat, don't even make us a Saints thing. We just talk to each other that way already. And that was good to hear. So I would say, like, one of the things that we have to think more about is getting them together to do activities and have it be more focused versus just chatting. I'm glad they're just chatting. I would love, as a runner, maybe I'll offer to have them go running with me, and I'll volunteer, not at 5:30 a.m. in Rutherford, but I'll like do something with them like that, because I love that grit idea of coming together for something totally not academic. But I think we also have to do some social things with them. That's our next phase, is like getting them together to have some fun. And the only thing that's worked so far is, believe it or not, I did online bingo with them, and they loved it. They were so into online bingo. So I was like, all right, we did something, like, it doesn't have to be anything amazing, but I feel like we have to find other things like that. We have a bowling team, and the bowling team is apparently very academic. And I'm like, maybe we like join up with the bowling team now with masks and like face off with them or something to like do a challenge. So I don't know what it's going to be, but.
I work with a Boy Scout group, and we did a Zoom scavenger hunt where the leader listed a topic and every kid had to run around the house and find that item and bring it back to the camera. So you might try something like that.
That's such a good idea.
Bill, it's funny you mentioned that, because we were trying to do a scavenger hunt for their orientation over the summer, and it was going to be in person. And then when it went to virtual, we didn't do it. So we'll do that for our orientation this summer virtually. I think that'd be great.
I gotta point out, some of you guys know this, maybe a lot of you don't, but I'm the data guy, right? We're supposed to do these evaluations that are dry and boring, but my history is I was a student affairs professional. I worked at the University Center, and we put together programs. And so I'm a student affairs person first and foremost. That's my history. So when I hear these things, I get excited. Taking on the bowling team sounds like that's down my alley. How much fun is that? When I was a grad student, I was in the University Center, and I just fell in love with this idea of being at universities for the rest of my life, which just kind of led to a lot of my career choices ever since. Now I find myself in the data kind of evaluation piece of it all, but it's all about understanding and appreciating those human relationships that happen in universities.
Can I say something, Matt?
Yeah, of course you can.
Meeting time was another major hurdle that we encountered. Didn't see it coming at all, and just socked us right in the nose, because we're recruiting from all different majors, and you'll never, you put 5 people together, and now that suddenly there's no common meeting time at all, and you can spin your wheels for a long time trying to figure out when it's going to be. And so I let the students, go through the process of elimination, and that's how we came up with the morning meeting time, because they all have something to do in the evening, working with their student project teams, student organizations, et cetera, jobs, et cetera. But everybody's free before 8 a.m. Now, of course, they don't like it. They will hate it. They'll reject it. They'll badmouth you for this. But it takes about 4 weeks to get acclimated, and you being a runner, you can appreciate this, acclimated to why am I getting up? They actually look forward to meeting up with their group. And I contend, and I'll let Matt run the data on this, if he can make this linkage, it'd be worth a Pulitzer or something. Our students' GPA soars after 1 year in the LDP. Last semester, we had 10 of our students have perfect 4.0 GPAs, highest GPAs they've ever had. And some of that's influenced by COVID and the grading, but it's not unusual. We have seen people's grades go up every single cohort that we've ever had. And when I ask them about this, they say, well, I have to be more disciplined with my time. I don't get to do all my online gaming because I have to get to bed because I have to get up so early. And in time, they learn when they come back from the workout to not go back to bed. Then now they're up, they're fully awake. It's 8 a.m. They don't have class till noon. Spend that time studying and doing the homework instead of late at night. And again, grades go up. It's an amazing reward and byproduct of getting up early and meeting. And it might be a sour sell in the beginning, but, and I hate to say it this way, but you have the leverage of saying, this is what the scholarship program is about. And if they'll trust you, give it 4 weeks and they'll start seeing they love coming together as that community, and you'll realize the benefits of that.
When I looked through the questions on program sustainability, I saw a lot of kind of connection to community, business sponsorships, cultivating partnerships, and things like that. I want to spend a couple minutes just talking about what that means, because sustainability, we can take that term, we can turn it into a lot of different things. Doing things, because we have this money, we can do some new things that are going to take on a life of its own after it's over. But I guess what I'm thinking about is, how do we find ways to recruit, involve people outside of ourselves that can support this bigger idea? So maybe I'll just throw that out to the group and see what you're thinking with regard to that partnership element outside of your initial PI group and your initial, the institution. Thoughts there? Well, I'll start off and I'll talk a little bit about an experience I had while we're thinking through this. In a totally different world, outside of our STEM and noise program evaluation support that we do, my firm was very fortunate in receiving a program called STEM Camp, which is summer STEM camps for third through eighth grade kids. And so we have this going on in 10 different locations. And we're thinking about this, and it's happening in 10 different military connected communities, school districts that are right next to military bases. And so we started by partnering with an organization that has locations in every state that is around biotechnology, but we're finding that we're trying to create connection with the military contractors that are near the military base. And so this is organic, I'm only learning this by doing it, but there's a lot of interest in the work that we're doing because we're reaching out and trying to encourage third through eighth grade students to become STEM professionals, at least excite them about the idea, because that's what you can do at those earlier ages. If they can, the research shows that those students can identify and think, when I grow up, I want to be a STEM professional of some sort. They start thinking about that at that early age, they're 2 times more likely to actually go through with it than if they had no idea that it actually happened. So in doing that, we talk about it with different community organizations with the idea of just creating excitement and involvement. And down the road, we're actually going to start asking for them to start funding these programs. And I mean, honestly, I've told you, I'm like a student affairs professional figuring this out as I go along, but that's been our experience in just creating connection. and just starting with conversations with different people. And I think that I'm at the earliest stages of it, just like some of you guys are. So that's been our experience in creating connection within our community. One thing that Charity and NASDAQ and Pat and I have talked about is creating some more connection with the outside of Felician with different bio New Jersey organizations and trying to bring them in and talk to the students as well. So anyway, those are just different ideas that we've put out there. I don't know if you have any ideas about your partnerships or business sponsors.
My program began by a request from industry who said that they didn't need graduates, they needed future technical leaders, and that we weren't preparing them with the education, the skills that were valuable to industry. In fact, our primary benefactor said that we had a mission, and that was to create the most valuable product in the world today, and that is a future technical leader. And I totally bought into that charge. I came from industry. I saw what a difference it made. And so I took that proposition. His company supported us. He said he didn't want to bear the burden alone. I went out and asked other companies. Lo and behold, 9 other companies said, heck yeah, we're having a hard time. And if we can make a meager $5,000 investment to be a partner in your program, yes, count us in. And it's been wonderful. All of you are building the best products in the world for business and industry who are crying for your outstanding graduates out there today. And so I would just encourage you to go out there and ask. And it kind of relates to, I know another really great program is called CEO, Creating Entrepreneurial Opportunities. It's a little similar to like the Junior Achievement Program for high schoolers, but they ask all the small businesses in the town to give $1,000 to support the program. Well, you put 25 small businesses together, and suddenly you've got a really amazing program that's available to all these high schoolers out there. And their primary goal was to get the students to graduate and come back and reinvest to make a career out of staying in their small communities. And so find out what your vision is, and then go out there and start asking some of these community partners, these stakeholders, to support your program. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Go ahead, Bill.
Our Career Development Center was already reaching out to local tech companies, and they were part of our grant development. So we had a lot of letters of support from local companies saying this is something we think is a great idea. We have just had last week before, the first meeting of the Tech Advisory Board. Now the Career Center is organizing this. This is something they wanted to do anyway. And they used the grant as an excuse to get it launched. So we are just beginning conversations with these local companies, with the representatives, about what they would like to see and how they can support us. And in 2 years, when our students are ready for internships, we hope to have groomed these companies to be ready to offer them.
Bill, I will tell you from my experiences that if I were you, I'd cut your career services almost out of the loop, because what these companies want to know, they need Bill Fenton's cell phone number. They need to connect with that champion, that program champion, who knows each and every single one of these students. You can talk about the strengths and weaknesses and your personal connections to these students. And so you can work collaboratively with these sponsors to get them the best fit, the best match for the success. And it becomes a great way for you to sell a program too. Career services, they're used to doing a management function. send us your resumes, or we'll have an online career fair and we'll invite these companies. We'll just see the speed dating thing occur. You're the personal matchmaker, and it feels really great to be that person who can make that connection for your students and see their success. That would be my.
Appreciate you had some things that you wanted to share with us.
So one of the things I'm curious to get feedback on, one of our program ideas, we are planning on setting our scholars up with a student mentor, but also we're calling it a mentoring triad, where we have a student mentor, but also a professional mentor. We're interested in, our students are coming from students with engineering, biology, chemistry, physics interests. And we're going to put together a kind of like an advisory board, as Bill mentions, but this is specifically for the program. So it's not through our Career Development Center. But Otterbein has a economic development partner. It's called One Columbus. And they have, Otterbein has hired them for the university broadly, but they have committed to helping us work and find industrial partners to kind of sit on our advisory board, and then to have some of those partners serve as mentors to some of these students. So I'm hoping that will help build these bridges. I haven't thought about asking anyone for money to support the program. I'm more interested in, at this point, in mentoring and maybe internship employment pathways. But maybe I should be thinking more broadly.
Well, we're right at time. And I'm going to follow up with everybody by sending contact information for everybody who's on this meeting so that you guys can reach out to one another. I encourage you to do that. You don't need to involve me. That's okay. The point of all this was just to create community so everyone had a chance to meet one another. Are there any parting thoughts, any parting ideas from our session today?
Bridget, we've done the mentor match before, and it will, the students don't know how to ask for help. You can match them with a CEO, their dream job, and they don't have the discipline to call that person. And so it needs to be a standing meeting time on a monthly basis, because these executives, mentors, whoever they are busy, but
Sure.
find a good common meeting time, and then it will repeat itself and they'll get some value out of it.
So probably providing some structure.
Absolutely.
Be helpful. Okay. Thank you. That's good input. Matt, thank you so much for doing this.
Sure. And when I send out that email, I'm going to ask the question, do you guys want to do this again? And then how frequently, if you do, because I don't want to schedule meetings that people are feeling, obligated to go to, or that are just another meeting to go to. But if you think it's valuable, I'm happy to put these meetings together. Not necessary, but if it's something you think you'd like to do and you'd like to have these meetings maybe monthly or quarterly or something like that, I'm happy